Hey, what's happening everyone? Welcome back to another video. Not gonna say another review because goddamn, fourth video today. Yes, I will be taking a few days off after this unless trailers keep dropping. But as far as I'm concerned, my next video after this will be the Mario movie review, finally on April 5th. But for right now, let's talk about a little movie called ENYS Men. So ENYS Men is a low-budget, retro, indie, folk horror film. I know, just by me saying that, you already know that there's not going to be a lot of people that like this movie. You know, if you aren't a fan of folk horrors such as The Lighthouse, Midsommar, Wicker Man, or indie low-budget horror films that don't give you any explanation like Skinamarink or The Outwaters, you might just want to pass this one. But in saying that, I wasn't a fan of either Skinamarink or Outwaters. I'm not gonna say I wasn't a fan. Actually, I wasn't a huge fan. I didn't hate the movies, but I did kind of see them as something where I just didn't really get as much as I was hoping for. Now this one, I'm not gonna say that I didn't get too much. I got plenty, but it wasn't the stuff I was hoping to get out of it, but I do recommend this movie to an extent. So let's talk about ENYS Men. So here's just me coming out of the gate being as vague as possible. So ENYS Men centers on a woman who is on a mysterious island studying a rare species of flower. That's it. This island, we don't know anything about it. This woman, we don't know anything about it. This home she's staying in, these people that are coming in and off the island, we don't know anything about them. And as she's studying this flower, weird and strange, unexplainable things are happening around the island, getting increasingly more cryptic and fucking strange. And yes, this is an indie folk horror film that has you asking a lot of questions. Yeah, so I basically went in this movie, I'm gonna be honest, not expecting to be incredibly blown away. You know, I went into this movie, was like, okay, yeah, you know, it's gonna have nods to like Midsommar and The Wicker Man. There's gonna be a lot of cryptic imagery. There's gonna be a lot of, you know, symbolism and metaphors. And this will probably be a movie that gets like a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes from the critics, and then gets like a 30% from the audience score. This also was a movie that in the trailer, it drops this son of a bitch. Yeah, I think that we all know better that whenever a film states this, it's like, okay, let's just settle down. There's probably going to be like a naked woman in it at some point acting mad. There's going to be some guy mumbling nonsense that comes in and out of the picture. And then there's some blaring, retro, screeching noises and, you know, some blood that isn't explained. Now that's kind of what I was expecting, but I'm just going to tell you basically just kind of how my thoughts spewed out as this movie went on. Because this kind of is a movie that just kind of spews out and just collapses as the movie goes on. Again, if you were fans of The Lighthouse or Midsommar, you might have a liking to this one. But if you weren't a fan of Outwaters or Skinamarink, then you might not. And I know that kind of like coincides with each other, but I'm just saying that because I did like The Lighthouse and Midsommar to a degree. They weren't my favorite movies, but as far as like cryptic, low-budget indie horrors go, yeah, I did find them more cinematic than Outwaters and Skinamarink, and that's what divides this. This is a very cinematic movie. It is an unnerving, like, indie, folk, low-budget horror film that has a lot of questions to it, like Outwaters and Skinamarink. But as a viewing experience, both from like what your eyes are seeing and what you're hearing around you in a theater, just again as a cinematic piece, that's where you're gonna really enjoy this movie if you do at all. Again, a fine line between as a viewer, not necessarily as an audience per se, if that makes sense. So first off, the movie is absolutely gorgeous, and not just in the sense of like it has this retro style. So the movie apparently does take place in the 70s. It doesn't really say that at all in the movie, like right offhand. From the synopsis, yes, this is meant to be filmed and looked like it was, you know, in the time where the movie takes place, which is in the 70s. But again, this movie is absolutely gorgeous to look at, not just from that retro like aspect, but just with this director's skills. How he made this almost like portrait, this like canvas painting as a horror film. Like seriously, this looks like if Bob Ross directed a fucking horror film. There's a lot of very gorgeous and very interesting and very hypnotizing color sequences that, cut to other scenes and do it in a very, just profound way. It kind of has that door left open for the next scene to come and how that scene looks. It does very cool, passing on the torch to the other scenes, and I really like that. Now, as for the movie itself and with the horror and kind of how what happens surrounding all this beautiful cinematography, yes, this is your typical film in this fashion that, where there is a lot of cryptic, ominous scenes that have you asking a lot of questions. There are a lot of scenes specifically that are repeated as the movie goes on, and as these scenes are repeated, there's just enough where it kind of builds on what it last showed you, kind of like a cliffhanger and everything to certain scenes that you really want to wonder what is down there. What is up with this house? Again, what is up with this person? What is up with this island, this flower? Everything surrounding the movie itself, it does that thing where it'll give you enough to, again, spark questions, and then it'll bring it back, several minutes later. There's always something that has you attached to this film, and that's what I really liked about it. As someone who was expecting to hate this movie and isn't, a huge fan of, films like Skinamarink or whatever, or Outwires, but is a bigger fan of more cinematic pieces of this vein, like The Lighthouse or something. It didn't always just have something on screen for the sake of shock factor or to make you think or something. No, it was just, even if you didn't know what the hell was going on, there was always something on screen, just again as a cinematic piece that was always going to reel you in. This is a very psychological movie. There's a lot of times where the camera's just dead pan on blatantly on someone's face, and at times you don't really know what they're thinking or what they're looking at or if what they're seeing is real. It is one of those, again, stereotypical kind of thought-provoking indie horrors. And again, the bastardized part of me wants to say that yeah, this is one of those horror movies that sadly you're gonna watch it and think okay, not a lot happens, but in a weird way this movie kind of felt it kind of feels that's kind of a core of a joke, where the director and the makers of this movie were we know people are going to think that. But it is also one of those movies that, however you look at it, you may think that this is kind of a slap in the face or pretentious, or what I said earlier about, how there's always something, even if it's remotely, just something always reeling you in some sort of degree. Again, this is a movie that kind of just spews its guts as it kind of, goes on, and just kind of just is oh, you're confused? Yeah? You're a little bit weirded out? Well, have some more! That's what you signed up for, right? At least until, the final half of the film, it is one of those movies where it's there are times where it's only, every few minutes. You're oh, something new's happening. What is this? And it kind of feels there's just, little breadcrumbs, little specific things that are planted specifically throughout the movie at specific times and specific angles and a specific kind of light being shed on it. And that's just the thing, is I was surprised at how content I was with even the first half of this movie. Again, maybe every few minutes, only receiving so much at once. At least in the sense of a horror film. This movie it does so well with you can tell that this director has a lot of skill and that they had plenty to show off in this movie, and they have plenty of tools, but they just used it also sparingly. It just feels like a very minimalist movie. And again, this is one of those movies that, at least for me, from being someone who wasn't a huge fan of Skinamarink or the Outwaters so much as The Lighthouse or something, where you can kind of be on both ends. You can see this as okay, yeah, yep, exactly what I thought it was going to be. But as an actual cinema fan, not just as an artsy indie horror fan who sees that as something that's bastardized point of view, or a pretentious sort of way, however you view it, I think that there is enough both out of what this movie is as a whole and out of this horror film, with its kind of scale and everything. It does offer not only enough in every sense, however you look at it, but it does offer a lot of surprises where, for example, even with the horror, there is some nods to even old-fashioned, standard horror fans. They will have enough where it's just again, enough to kind of keep you there in the very least, just waiting to see what happens next. Again, this is just one of those movies where it's it's kind of a mixture of both. You're wondering okay, what the hell is happening? And then you're oh, well, even if that isn't grabbing me, I can at least set on this. And at the end of, whether it was like, a certain act or a certain sequence or just at the end of whatever, it always felt like, in the very least, like there was something there. It just felt like it was necessary to some degree, however you look at it. Again, at its core, everything from the flowers to the island to this woman to the home she's staying at to the people coming on and off screen as just, an indie folk, low-budget horror mystery. That's what we signed up for. We didn't see this movie to see how pretty it was. I mean, some people, maybe saw the trailer and were like, okay, that'll be a, cool, like, kind of filming style of the movie, this being shot in, like, 16 millimeters or some shit. But that was just the biggest takeaway, is that as an actual cinematic movie, there was always something there. It always felt necessary, and again, not necessarily as an audience, but as a viewer. And both, like, the eyes and the ears and just... Again, just as a cinematic piece. And again, I know it may come off, as kind of like disappointing or like annoying that I'm talking about this as more of like a cinematic piece than an actual horror film, but the editing, how it was shot, the director's skills, it was so well done. And I'd actually, even if I wasn't a huge fan of this movie as a horror film, or like it wasn't exactly what I wanted out of it, and this is the most I gained from it, I'd still be interested in seeing what this director does next, just because of the perspectives from a cinema piece. Again, I think that the movie offers, in the very least, what cinema should, like from that perspective, and I kind of like want to give this film a positive review just because of how much I liked those specific things. But at the end of it, the biggest thing is that regardless of how much I liked those things or like how present they weren't what I wanted the most out of this film. And again, I still would have liked to like it more as a horror movie than as a cinematic piece, or at least equal. But again, as far as horror goes, there is a decent mix of it. You do get mostly that side of like folk, indie, low budget horror, but there is also like little nods and little like breadcrumbs of standard old-fashioned horror that does blindside you. And again, at the end of it all, a lot of it mostly does pay off. And overall, guys, yeah, I do feel like I want to give this a high mixed review. Again, there was a lot that I did like about it and a lot that I was surprised in. And even in the, areas where I wasn't fully committed to or like wasn't fully like blown away by, again, in the end, it still did pay off for the most part. Also, the movie, I don't know how long it was. I want to say it was only like maybe under 100 minutes. But again, it is one of those movies where it's like, it's either very slow and very cryptic and very slow burn. That's like the first half of the movie, or in the second half of the movie, it's just like, okay, we're just gonna give you like a buffet of just nonsense and horror and mindfuckery and just exactly what you expect out of like a film like this to just go off the rails. And yeah, honestly, at the end of it all, it really felt like after the movie, I walked out of there and I was like, I feel like I actually went insane on this island as a viewer. So I mean, take that as you will. But yes, guys, that is going to do it for my review of ENYS Men. If you guys did get the chance to check this out, I believe I did view a preview screening. It does come out worldwide on the 31st. But whether you check this out tonight or you plan on checking it out, let me know what you thought about it down below, as well as the review, guys. But thank you guys so much for watching this review and all the other videos I dropped today. Again, I will be taking a few days off before getting into the Mario trailer, or the Mario review, unless something drops like a trailer or something. But with all that being said, guys, I'm gonna wrap it up here. This concludes it for my review of ENYS Men. Thank you guys so much for watching, and hope you guys are having a great night. Thank you so much.